I am a huge fan of the popular South Korean boy band, BTS, also known as Bangtan boys. I never expected to have a nightmare about them, though. In my dream, all 7 members of BTS had transformed into supervillains, and I had been chosen to fight against them. The adventure started in a vast grassland. I was on a mission to find a precious diamond that could save the world. However, the 7 supervillains were trying to stop me from achieving my goal. As I was walking through the vast grassland, suddenly, I saw a man charging towards me from a distance. He had the force of a lion and let out a powerful roar that sent shockwaves through the sky. As he got closer, I realized he was RM, one of the members of BTS. I dodged his shockwave attack, which was empowered by his rapping. I then discovered that I also had superpowers. I raised my hand, and a large piece of the grassland lifted into the air. With a swing of my arm, I sent the piece flying towards RM, who used his lion strength to let out another powerful roar and destroy it. His shockwave was so strong that I could barely stand, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity. I quickly sent a second piece of grassland flying towards RM, who was forced to defend it head-on. The impact caused him lose the balance. While he was recovering, I dashed past him and continued on my journey to find the precious diamond. After escaping the grassland, I came across a volcano, with lava and fire shooting out in every direction. I had to carefully navigate my way through the hot molten lava and flames, but suddenly a rock on fire came flying towards me. I quickly jumped back, and as I did, I saw a guy standing on top of the volcano. It was Suga, another member of BTS. Suga cast a spell, and the volcano erupted with even more fire and lava, all of it coming straight at me. I dodged as much as I could, but some of the lava spilled onto my shirt, burning small holes into the fabric. Despite the pain, I stayed focused and summoned the power to control rocks, sending them hurtling towards Suga to fight back. However, Suga was quick on his feet and, surrounded by fire, he leaped into the air and waved his arms, unleashing a massive fireball that obliterated the rocks I had sent at him. The fireball continued to move towards me, forcing me to dodge and leap out of the way. I fell badly, but I knew I had to keep fighting. In that moment, I remembered I had a bottle of water with me. I quickly sent a boulder flying towards Suga, and when he dodged it, I spilled the water over him. Some of it hit him, causing him to cry out in pain. I didn't hesitate and continued my attack, sending 2 more boulders towards him. One of them hit him hard, and before he could recover, I dashed past him and escaped the volcano, continuing my journey with determination. Next, I arrived at an airport and was surprised to find a small airplane and a key lying next to it. Without hesitation, I got in and started the engine. Within seconds, I was soaring through the sky, enjoying the beautiful views below. As I flew, the airplane suddenly started to shake and bounce around. I tried to control it, but the turbulence became stronger and stronger. My heart raced as I struggled to keep the airplane steady, but it felt like I was losing control. Just then, I noticed another airplane appearing behind me. I peered closer and saw a guy standing on the roof of the aircraft. It was J-Hope, another member of BTS. It all made sense now. He was controlling the wind that was causing the turbulence. I knew I had to act fast, but I didn't know how to escape his grasp. I tried to lower my airplane and land, but J-Hope kept sending gusts of wind from below, making it impossible for me to safely touch down. As I desperately searched for a solution, an idea came to mind. I flew lower and lower and pretended to land. J-Hope saw me doing it and immediately sent a powerful gust of wind from below. But I had anticipated this and pulled up the steering wheel just in time. As I applied power, my airplane quickly flew up with the help of J-Hope's wind. As I continued flying higher and higher, I noticed the sky turning darker and darker. I had flown so high that I was now entering space. I looked back, and J-Hope's airplane stopped following me. I knew he was unable to fly into space. While I was flying in outer space, my airplane started shaking heavily. I realized that it couldn't handle the conditions, so I had no choice but to pull the eject handle and launch myself out of the plane. I found myself floating in the vast emptiness of space with no way to control my direction or land anywhere. The darkness was overwhelming, and I felt my body temperature dropping, making me weaker and weaker. Suddenly, a warm light appeared in front of me, gradually getting closer. I felt the warmth spreading around me, and I wished it would last longer. As the light approached, I could see that it was Jin, another member of BTS. Was he here to rescue me? He stopped approaching me at a distance and raised both arms. His entire body began to emit a blinding light, so bright my eyes could barely open. At the same time, the temperature around me began to rise. Initially, I felt comfortable and warm in the outer space, but now the heat was becoming unbearable. I suddenly realized that Jin was using heat and radiation to attack me instead of rescuing me. I felt helpless since I was unable to control myself in the vacuum of space, while he moved easily. I lacked any means of defense against his attack. Suddenly, a group of asteroids whizzed by us, providing me with an opportunity to fight back. I used my telekinetic powers to control 2 asteroids and hurl them towards Jin. He promptly destroyed them with his heat attack, looking smug at how easily he had thwarted my attacks. However, I had a different plan in mind. The asteroid attack was merely a distraction. When the smoke cleared, I used my telekinesis again, this time not to attack but to grab onto the remaining asteroids and use them as transportation. I clung to the asteroids as they shot away at lightning speed, dragging me with them and away from Jin. When I looked back, I saw Jin staring at me from a distance, watching me slip away from his grasp. I didn't know how long I had flown with the asteroid. Suddenly, I realized the asteroid group was heading towards a light blue planet. Shockingly, I realized they were going to crash. I quickly pushed myself away from the asteroid group and avoided crashing into the planet. However, I found myself falling through the planet's atmosphere, and its gravity was pulling me down. I twisted and turned my body and used my telekinetic power to land safely on the ground. When I stood up and looked around, I realized I was on a planet with nothing but ice. It was incredibly cold. I walked several miles on the ice, trying to find a warmer place, but all I could see was ice. Suddenly, I saw mountains standing far away. I thought there must be land, so I ran towards the mountains. Hours later, a large structure appeared in front of me. It was the mountain I saw earlier. However, it was not a mountain but a huge structure made out of ice, with an entrance. I entered and found myself standing in a large ice structure maze. I thought there must be warmer lands on the other side of the maze, so I started walking around eagerly looking for the exit. However, the maze was huge, and after hours of searching, I still could not find the way out. Suddenly, a person appeared in front of me. I realized he was Jimin, another member of BTS. I knew there was another fight coming up. I aimed a massive piece of ice at Jimin, but he intercepted it midair and countered with a larger chunk of ice. I evaded it and launched another ice attack, but he snatched it with ease and threw it back at me. I learned that Jimin's power was manipulating ice. Even though I had telekinetic power and could control ice too, his power with ice was much greater than mine. If we fought with ice, I would definitely lose. He started shooting more ice at me. I wanted to save my energy, so I stopped fighting back and started dodging by running through the maze. He walked through the ice walls and caught up to me easily. After running for a long time, I started to feel tired, while he showed no signs of slowing down. Finally, I knelt down and panted heavily. Suddenly, I saw smoke coming out of my mouth, caused by my warm breath. I realized that if Jimin controlled ice, he must dislike warmth. Now, the warmest thing was my heavy breath. I knew what I needed to do. I stopped running, conserving my energy. Continue kneeling down, I waited for him to approach me. Seconds later, he walked to my side and stood towering over me, thinking he was going to win the fight. I surprised him by jumping up and blowing warm air on his handsome face. He recoiled in pain and stepped back. My action angered him. He held up his right hand, and an ice ball started to increase in size. I knew he was going to let out his most powerful blow. I started running away from him, twisting and turning in the maze. Seconds later, his right hand held a huge ice ball, which he threw towards me. The ice ball broke through the ice walls of the maze and headed towards me. I knew that I wouldn't survive if I didn't dodge it, so I summoned all my strength and leaped ahead. The ice ball narrowly missed me, shattering through many walls of the maze and creating a wide path. I could see the end of the path, which led to the other side of the maze. Knowing there is a way out, my energy is renewed. I sprinted through the path while Jimin chased me. After I emerged from the maze, I found myself standing at the edge of a warm forest. Without hesitation, I ran into the forest. After a while, I was completely exhausted and collapsed onto the ground, losing consciousness. Despite being in a weakened state, I knew I was safe from Jimin because he couldn't follow me into the warmer region. When I woke up, I found myself resting on a bed of green grass. The sun shone brightly, and the surrounding scenery was breathtaking, with vibrant flowers and towering trees that surrounded me. The forest hummed with life, and I was immediately at ease. As I stood up, my eyes were drawn to the flowers. They were colorful and vibrant, but one had withered away. I was sad to see its appearance, but suddenly it came to life, and its petals raised and brightened once more. I was glad to see it had been revived. My happiness was short-lived as a loud noise startled me, and I turned around to see a tree rapidly growing before me. Its branches thickened, and in a shocking turn of events, the tree attempted to strike me. I dodged the attack and landed on my feet, only to find some vines creeping up around me, grasping at my ankles. It seemed that the once peaceful plants of the forest had suddenly turned hostile towards me. A looming shadow caught my attention, and I glanced up to see a man standing on top of a tree. He must be controlling the plants to attack me. When I watched closer, I realized he was V, another member of BTS. I was forced to dodge the attacks from the branches, vines, and sharp leaves that were hurled in my direction. I fled deeper into the forest, hoping to find refuge, but V and his plants pursued me closely. Finally, I spotted a small cabin in the middle of the forest. I bolted inside and quickly shut the door, scanning the cabin for any weapons to defend myself. The peace was short-lived as a loud crash echoed throughout the cabin, and huge branches shattered the windows and reached inside. Vines crept in under the door, but I was able to find a fire torch from the fireplace to help me in the battle. As V commanded his plants to attack the cabin, I used the fire torch to fight back. In the chaos, my torch lit an oil barrel in the corner, causing the cabin to go up in flames and many of the plants to wither and die. I escaped out the back of the cabin and made a run for the other side of the forest. Watching the cabin on fire, V stopped chasing me, perhaps not wanting to witness more of his beloved plants die. I eventually reached the other side of the forest and arrived at a beautiful beach. In the distance, something sparkled and caught my eye. It had to be the precious diamond I had been seeking. I stood on the shore, gazing out at a distant island in the vast ocean. In my heart, I could sense that the power of the diamond was located there. I saw a faint twinkle of light, beckoning me to come and retrieve it. Without hesitation, I noticed a boat nearby and jumped aboard. The excitement of getting closer to the diamond made my heart race as I sailed towards it. However, as I approached, a massive wave crashed into my boat, sending it further away from the island. The ocean grew increasingly tumultuous, making my boat unstable. I attempted to use my telekinesis to steady it, but the power of the waves was too strong. Suddenly, I saw a towering tsunami in the distance, with a figure standing atop it. I recognized the person as Jungkook, another member of BTS. He was using his powers to control the ocean and attack me. I was determined to reach the diamond, so I continued to use my telekinetic abilities to propel my boat towards the island. Jungkook cast a spell, causing a whirlpool to form beneath my boat. I knew I had to escape this or be consumed by the deep waters. With all my might, I drove my boat up the whirlpool and back to the surface. I also aimed a stream of ocean water at Jungkook, but he dodged with ease. Seeing me heading to the island in great speed, he raised his arms and summoned a massive tsunami that blocked my path. I was not afraid and sped my boat towards the incoming wave. As the tsunami almost hit my boat, I summoned all my strength and drove it up the towering wall of water. My boat ascended towards the sky, propelled by my unwavering determination. When it reached the top of the wave, the boat leapt into the air, with everything below me becoming smaller and smaller. Without hesitation, I kicked off the boat and jumped towards the island. Jungkook was surprised by my sudden move, and before he could react, I landed safely in the middle of the island next to the beautiful diamond. I bowed down and picked up the precious stone, feeling a surge of energy running through my body as my strength and power increased. I knew that I had acquired the most significant power in the world, and I couldn't help but let out a loud laugh. All of a sudden, I spotted 7 people on the shore of the island. It was the 7 members of BTS. They stood still, with their heads bowed down, seemingly praying for me. It felt as if they were praying for me to turn away from my wicked ways and become good. In that moment, I realized the truth. It was not Suga, J-Hope, Jin, Jimin, V, and Jungkook who were the supervillains. It was me who was consumed by the desire for power and strength, and I couldn't stop myself from wanting to get the diamond of power. On the other hand, they were the superheroes trying to prevent me from obtaining the diamond of power and destroying the world. For some reason, tears streamed down my face. I could feel kindness and goodness in my heart. That's when I woke up from my dream. It was not a nightmare about BTS being supervillains, but a nightmare about me being the supervillain. As I lay on my bed for 30 minutes, I replayed every moment of my dream in my mind. Then, I reached out to turn up the volume of BTS's music and listened to their songs with a smile on my face. I knew that I would always love BTS and that they would always be my superheroes.
The BTS of the following story stands for behind the scene. It was the final day of filming for the horror movie, The Abandoned Asylum, and the crew was relieved to have wrapped up the shoot. They had spent months in the creepy old building, and they were all looking forward to going home and leaving the darkness and madness of the asylum behind. As the director gave the final instructions and the cameras stopped rolling, the crew began to pack up their gear. They were all chatting and laughing, relieved that it was over, when one of the editors noticed something strange. In the corner of the room, on the behind-the-scenes footage they had just filmed, there was a person standing there who nobody recognized. The person seemed to appear in random shots throughout the video. He was always in the background, never saying anything, just standing there and watching. Nobody could remember seeing him during the shoot, and nobody knew who he was. The crew began to feel uneasy as they watched the footage. They started to wonder if they were being watched the entire time they were filming. As they continued to watch the behind-the-scenes footage, they noticed something even more disturbing. In one scene, the stranger handed a drink to the main actor, who accepted it without question. The crew assumed he was just an assistant or a member of the production team. But when they asked the actor about the man, he said he had never seen him before. The actor explained that he thought the man was a part of the production team, but he never saw him again after that day. The crew began to investigate the stranger's identity, but they couldn't find any record of him in the production crew list or any other records. They also checked the footage from the security cameras, but there was no sign of him anywhere. The crew was left wondering who this stranger was, and why he was there. Was he a ghost or a figment of their imagination? Or was he something much more sinister? In the end, the crew was left with more questions than answers. They were left to wonder if the abandoned asylum was really as deserted as they thought it was, or if there was something darker lurking in the shadows, watching their every move.
The BTS of the following story stands for bedtime story. Growing up, I always listened to bedtime stories before going to sleep. It was a comforting routine that helped me drift off into a peaceful slumber. But as I got older, I realized that my reliance on these stories had turned into a necessity. If I didn't listen to a bedtime story, I would have the same recurring nightmare. In the nightmare, I found myself tied up in a dark, damp basement. My mouth was taped shut, and I could feel hunger and thirst gnawing at my insides. The worst part was the feeling of hopelessness, that I was trapped here forever, with no escape in sight. The nightmare was a result of a traumatic experience from my childhood. Coming from a wealthy family, I had always been chauffeured to school in the most expensive cars, with a driver and a butler at my beck and call. I had become spoiled and entitled, and would often be rude to them. One day, my routine ride to school took an unexpected turn. The car seemed to be driving for much longer than usual, and when I looked out the window, I realized we were in the middle of nowhere. I demanded answers from my butler and driver, but they remained silent. It wasn't until the car stopped and my butler grabbed my wrist and pulled me out of the car that I realized what was happening. I had been kidnapped by my own staff. They took me to a rundown house in the middle of nowhere and locked me up in a dark basement. I was barely given any food or water and was left to scream and cry for days. The only solace I found was from a radio they had left behind, which played bedtime stories all night long. Thankfully, I was rescued 10 days later and my captors were caught and jailed. The experience had a profound impact on me, and I vowed to never be rude or entitled to anyone again. But the one lasting effect was the recurring nightmare. If I didn't listen to a bedtime story before bed, I would find myself back in that dark basement, tied up and alone.
The BTS of the following story stands for Brian, Trisha, and Sammy. I had 3 childhood friends, Brian, Trisha, and Sammy, and we always played together. However, one day, all 3 of them vanished at the same time. I was too young to remember what happened to them, and my family soon moved away from the small town where we grew up. Over the years, I forgot about them until one day, I remembered that I used to have 3 dear friends. I asked my parents what happened to them, but they didn't know, and so I decided to return to the town and investigate. I searched high and low, knocking on doors and speaking to anyone who might remember my friends, but nobody had any recollection of 3 children disappearing in the town. I even tried to find their homes, but there was no trace of them. It was as if they had never existed. As I wandered to the outskirts of the town, I came across an old church and decided to go inside to ask if anyone there knew anything. An old nun walked out, and she seemed to recognize me. I was hopeful that if she remembered me, she might know something about my friends. But instead, she told me a shocking truth. The nun explained that when I was young, I had suffered from multiple personality disorder, a mental disorder characterized by the presence of at least 2 distinct and relatively enduring personality states. In my case, I had 4 different personalities, including Brian, Trisha, and Sammy, living inside me. Sometimes I was myself, and sometimes I would change into one of my other 3 personalities. My parents had brought me to this church, where a priest prayed for me for 3 years until my disorder vanished. The nun revealed that my friends had never existed, and they were just a part of my disorder. With the truth finally revealed, a sense of relief washes over me. Despite feeling initially upset about not knowing the truth earlier, I now feel grateful towards my parents for taking me to the church and seeking help for my disorder. I am also thankful for the nun and priest who helped heal me, allowing me to lead a normal life. As for Brian, Trisha, and Sammy, I may never see them again, but I am grateful for the memories we shared during our childhood. I realize now that they were not separate individuals, but rather a part of my own mind. Regardless, I appreciate the time we spent together and will always hold those memories close to my heart.
The BTS of the following story stands for Born to Sing. Once upon a time, there was a girl who was born to sing. She had a beautiful singing voice. She spent her childhood singing in church and local talent shows, and as she grew older, her talent became more apparent, attracting the attention of wealthy people who invited her to perform for them. Among her admirers was a wealthy, unattractive businessman who fell in love with her singing and desired to be with her. He showered her with gifts and attention, hoping to win her heart. The girl, however, found him physically repulsive and had no interest in him romantically. Despite her reluctance, the businessman continued to offer her significant sums of money to go out with him, which she eventually agreed to, lured by the promise of wealth. Unbeknownst to him, she continued to talk behind his back to her friends, expressing her disgust at his appearance. As time passed, the girl's talent became more renowned, and she was invited to perform at more high-profile events. However, the businessman's obsession with her grew, and he became increasingly possessive and jealous, causing the girl to distance herself from him. One day, the businessman discovered the girl's true feelings towards him and was heartbroken. Out of desperation, he turned to a witch who lived on the outskirts of town, seeking her help to curse the girl and take away her singing voice. The witch agreed to help the businessman, but warned him that there would be a heavy price to pay for her services. One day, while performing on stage, the girl suddenly lost her voice. She tried her best to sing, but her once beautiful voice was gone. The witch found the businessman and asked for payment, but the businessman refused to pay. As a result, the witch placed a spell on him, causing him to lose everything. He lost a lot of money on all his businesses and investments and became broke. Meanwhile, the girl, who was born to sing, lost her beautiful voice. The businessman, who had a lot of money, lost all his wealth, and the girl lost her talent, leaving both of them in despair.
The BTS of the following story stands for beneath the surface. I was a biologist, working in a laboratory on a frozen lake. Our research was focused on studying an ancient microorganism that lay hidden beneath the surface of the icy waters. It was a fascinating field of study, but little did I know that the microorganism we were working on was more than just a scientific curiosity. One day, one of my colleagues fell ill. We assumed it was just a flu, but soon after, others started to show symptoms. Fever, coughing, fatigue. It was spreading like wildfire through the laboratory, and we had no idea what was causing it. We began to quarantine the affected scientists, but it was too late. Before long, we were all sick. We knew we needed to find a cure, but the microorganism was unknown, and we had exhausted all our resources. That was until I remembered something that I had read in a long-forgotten research paper. The cure for this type of microorganism was said to be deep beneath the surface of the lake. It was a risk, but I knew I had to try. I donned my diving gear and took a deep breath before plunging into the freezing water. As I descended, I felt my body struggling against the pressure. The water was dark and murky, and I could barely see my hand in front of my face. But as I swam deeper, I began to see something strange. The water was glowing, and I could see small organisms floating around me. They were beautiful, but I knew I couldn't be distracted. I had to find the cure. Finally, I reached the bottom of the lake. There, buried in the mud, was a small plant. I recognized it from my research, and I knew it was the key to saving our lives. I carefully dug it up, placed it in a container, and began to swim back to the surface. But as I made my way up, I felt something grab my leg. I turned to see a dark figure emerging from the darkness. It was large and had tentacles, and it was pulling me back down into the depths. I struggled, kicking and fighting with all my might, but it was too strong. Just as I thought it was over for me, I felt a sharp pain in my leg, and the creature released its grip. I swam to the surface, gasping for air. When I looked back down, the creature was gone. I returned to the laboratory, and we used the plant to create the cure for the microorganism. In the end, we all recovered, but I knew that I had witnessed something terrifying beneath the surface. Something that I could never fully explain.
As a huge fan of BTS, Bangtan Boys, one of the most famous boy bands in the world, I couldn't wait for their concert in my city. I had been counting down the days for months and was thrilled to finally have a ticket in my hands. On the night of the concert, I arrived early at the stadium, feeling the excitement in the air. As I made my way through the crowds, I felt someone brush past me. I turned around, but the tall figure in the black hoodie was already walking away. I didn't think too much of it and continued on my way. Once the concert started, the energy in the stadium was electrifying. I was jumping and singing along with the rest of the fans. However, amidst all the fun, I noticed that the same figure from earlier was standing a few rows behind me. I couldn't make out his face because of the hoodie, but I could tell he was watching me intently. As the concert continued, I kept feeling his presence behind me, making me feel uneasy and paranoid. During one of the songs, I decided to confront him, but he quickly moved away. Despite the unsettling feeling of being watched, I refused to let it ruin my experience at my favorite boy band's concert. I pushed the thought aside and immersed myself in the excitement, jumping and cheering along with the other fans. Of all the members, Suga caught my eye the most. While I loved all 7 members of BTS, Suga held a special place in my heart, and I couldn't help but shout out my adoration for him. When the concert ended, I was disappointed it was over and shouted for an encore. Suddenly, someone knocked into me so hard that it almost knocked me down. I turned to see the guy in the black hoodie standing beside me, and I screamed in terror. However, my scream was drowned out by the cheers and shouts of other BTS fans. Without hesitation, I ran away as fast as I could, but the guy in the hoodie started following me. I was frightened and could feel him getting closer. Then, I saw a security guard standing not too far away and ran towards him, telling him about the stalker. The security guard tried to locate the stalker, but there were too many people and he couldn't find him. After the concert, the security guard called the police and they escorted me home safely. I still love BTS and their music, but the experience with the stalker left me shaken. I hope that in the future, I can enjoy their concerts without fear of being followed or stalked.
The BTS of the following story stands for back to school. Once upon a time, there was a student named Sarah who had just started her first day back to school after a long summer break. She was excited to see her friends and start a new year of learning, but something felt off. As she walked down the hallway to her classroom, she noticed that all the lockers were rusted and covered in cobwebs. The walls were peeling and the paint looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. When she arrived at her classroom, she found that the door was locked. She knocked, but there was no answer. She tried the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. Suddenly, she heard a faint whisper coming from inside the classroom. "Sarah," the voice whispered. "Don't come in here." Sarah was frightened, but she couldn't resist the curiosity that was gnawing at her. She tried the doorknob again, and this time, it creaked open. As she stepped inside, she saw that the classroom was completely empty. The desks were gone, the chalkboard was blackened, and the windows were boarded up. The only thing left in the room was a single piece of paper lying on the floor. Sarah picked up the paper and read the words scrawled on it in shaky handwriting. "You shouldn't have come back." Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her, and she heard a chorus of ghostly whispers filling the room. She turned to run, but the door was locked. She was trapped. As the whispers grew louder, Sarah realized that she was not alone. Something was in the room with her, something that had been waiting for her to return to school. She could feel its cold breath on her neck, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Sarah screamed as the ghostly presence took hold of her, dragging her deeper and deeper into the darkness of the classroom. She was never seen again, and to this day, the school is said to be haunted by the ghost of a student who dared to return to school.